Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In this video I'm going to give a brief, and I'm going to try and keep it brief, a brief overview of the DJI Mini 3 Pro. I did a little short on the specifications, but this one's going to be a bit of a delve into both the controller and the drone. I've had it for probably about a month, maybe 5-6 weeks, and I'm very impressed with this drone. The quality, the stability, all those things is quite amazing. So this video will just cover the controller and cover the drone, and I'll make another one where we actually take it out for flight and see what it is we can do with this drone. So without any further ado, I'm going to jump into this controller. From a ergonomics perspective, I'm very happy with the way this feels in your hand. It feels well designed, it just feels comfortable. The joysticks are in close proximity to your thumbs, the buttons are easily reachable. It's just, everything's well placed, easy, you don't really have to think about it. I can imagine after you spend some time with this controller, it will become second nature and you wouldn't have to go, and look for these things. Now, a little handy feature it's got with the DJI is you can detach the joystick and then it clips nicely at the back here, which I find quite handy. Be careful with it. If you drop it, it'll very easily vanish down a hole somewhere or in a drain, so be very careful. All right, let's get into the drone. In the front, it's got a built-in screen, which is top quality, no problems in that regard. Above the screen is you've got your 3 buttons. In the middle, Cine mode, normal and sport. To the left of that you've got a pause button, so if you're flying out and about unsure what to do, bang, hit the stop button, it'll stop dead in its tracks. To the right of that is your power button, which I'll run through in a minute and put it on, and then you've got your left and right joystick. Typical drone configuration, if you've flown drones before. On the left one, push it up, drone will take off. Pull it down, drone will come down. Push it left, it'll rotate left. Push it to the right, it'll rotate right, yaw, I think they call it. And then on the right one, push it forward, drone flies forward. Pull it back, the drone will come back. Go left, the drone goes left, and so on and so forth. So typical easy drone configuration. The best way to get used to these things is to grab the drone, get out there and put some safety parameters in place, obviously, and then practice. Moving on, so there are 4 lights on here, which I'll run through when I put the drone on. Moving to the very front. On the left-hand side, you've got a video record button, stop and start. To the right of that, you've got a camera shutter button. Push that down halfway, and it'll focus full way, and it'll take the picture. Now also bear in mind, in the very front here, this is where the transmission with the drone occurs. So always sort of be pointing it to the drone or angling it to the drone as best you can, because that's just going to enhance that transmission signal. And then under those 2 buttons are these 2 little dials. The one on the left is to tilt the camera downwards, and there's the sensitivity or feathering setting that allows that to slowly, or however you prefer to work. You can tweak that in the settings, which we'll run through in a minute. And then the right dial is for focusing in or out. There's not a huge amount of focus, but there is some focus, I beg your pardon, not focus, zooming ability with this dial, which is also very handy. And then finally, as far as buttons are concerned, there's 2 buttons underneath which are actually customizable. Currently, the one on the left I've got for a very quick tilt the camera down and click again to bring it back up. I find that awesome. That's what that's currently set to. The one on the right is if your camera is in landscape mode and you quickly want to shoot to vertical mode, just push that button, bang, you're in vertical mode. So you might be working on quite a big project where a lot of your stuff is sort of cinematic and it's in 16:9 format, but you want to quickly post some, like a trailer or a snippet of what's coming. You can quickly turn that camera vertical, take a shot, do a little video clip, and there's your social media content ready to go. Anything else? There's some vents at the bottom there, and I find the battery life on this quite impressive too. Once it's charged, so underneath, that's where there's a little slot for your SD card, and your USB-C charging port is also down there. It does have 2 threaded holes where you can put a lanyard should you want to have it hanging around your neck. And then, like I said, it's quite meaty, quite grunty, feels real comfortable in the hand. So what I'm going to do now is I'll fire up the screen, and then we can have a look at what you first greeted with when you put this controller on. I'm not going to put the drone on as yet because there's some things that I'll run through on here first, and then when we're good to go, we'll fire the drone up as well. So in order to put it on, it's a very quick, just push the button once and then push and hold, and you'll get that little tune and it'll fire up. So I'm going to cut to this screen now, and then we'll take it from there. All right, so I've got the screen recording. It does a little ping. I'll show you how to get that to that. Actually, I'll run through all those menu items, and like I said, I'll keep the drone off for the time being. So the way to get to any of the settings is just swipe down from the top of the screen, and then you greet it with like a notifications panel on the left, and that'll give you some settings, and your last screen capture will be saved over there. So and then to the right of that, you've got your Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, blah blah blah, but I'll get to that in a minute. Before we get stuck into this little menu, I just want to draw your attention to the little hexagon nut on the top, because that's where you get to some settings around your network, connected devices, storage, compass, your system, user instructions, and so forth and so on. So by all means, go through these one by one. Make sure you can put in your Wi-Fi and things like that. There is another thing that I need to point your attention to. When you go to your before we get there, before I get to the other screen, and then once you're on back to this screen, you'll get your Wi-Fi signal will show up there. You can put your Bluetooth on should you wish to. There is an airplane mode, so I imagine if you want to run through some of your footage while you're flying somewhere or on your way back from somewhere, you can have a look at it. Just make sure you put it into airplane mode. You also got a mute button where it'll switch off any of the notifications, which is quite handy. There is a volume button on here for any of the tutorials that you listen to that is actually in another menu. So I will swipe down again just to bring you back to that menu. And so this is like the home screen of the controller if you're not connected to the drone. And on the top right, you've got an academy that you can join. And all that is, it's a series of tutorials from beginner. It's like a learning center and a course library for beginner, elementary and intermediate. Certainly have a look through those. There's definitely some things that you're going to learn. Moving out of the academy, it does have a connection guide here that sort of prompts you. Depending on the craft you got, you can move through all the different ones, select the one that you've got. In our case, it's the DJI Mini 3 Pro, and then it'll prompt you and guide you as to how to power it on and connect the aircraft. It's really not that hard to do by yourself. So once the connection dies done, we can go into our profile. Now the profile is reasonably important because the very first thing at the bottom is a settings hexagon nut again, because that's where you'll find your firmware updates. So once we fired up the drone and it's connected, it's important to always go to that setting before you fly and just check if there's a firmware update, right? And you can see you can just tap check for firmware updates and it'll check it. And it says your drone is currently up to date. There's some other menu items in there. You can replay a beginner guide, unlock some geo zones. So certainly have a play and see that you'll make sure you're familiar with all those things. There's a device management, which you click on. The device that once it's on, it'll come up and be in that menu. So obviously the drone's off at the moment, won't be in there. There's the forum, the store, and it's got an handy Find My Drone feature, which hopefully we will never get to use. And then on the left there, it gives you a log of all your flight information, which I find kind of handy. So you can scroll through this, look at all the different flights, actually click on one, and you can watch that whole flight sort of post flight if you want. And as you can see, it's busy playing over there, 11 seconds, and I took it out for 15 minutes on that particular day. So you may or may not find this handy, I'm not sure yet, but it's good to know that it exists. Moving on from there, I think that pretty much covers it. On the top right, you do have like a customer support icon, online support, repair and exchanges and things like that. So that does exist within the controller. What else is there? We're back. SkyPixel is basically like an online community of creators that share what it is they creating with a drone from all over the world. Certainly worth having a look at, and it's quite inspiring to see what some people are achieving with these drones. And don't underestimate the DJI Mini 3 Pro. It's an amazing little drone. So certainly have a look, and you will be well inspired after going through some of that footage. In addition to the SkyPixel, we've got our album, which is straightforward. Any footage that you've got saved, both on the drone or on the internal card, will show up there. And then there's some fly spots on top there. And all that is, it allows you to punch in a particular location on a map, and it'll bring up some, flying spots in that area. Also, once again, you may or may not find that useful. So look, that sort of concludes the screen. I know I'm flying through it quite quickly, but what you need to get out of this is basically play around with it, put the drone off, put this thing on, and then have a bit of a read, because there's some useful information in there and some pointers that actually can help the cause. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to fire up the drone, and then I'll do another screen recording showing what it is we get to see once the drone is fired up. So, uno momento. All right, I must remember to hit record on there once I fire this drone up. So anyway, let's run through the drone. First thing, it comes with this very, very handy camera cover. I would encourage you to always use that when the drone's not in use. The componentry inside this gimbal, and it's a tiny camera, so you want to protect it as much as you can, because this is the important part here. That gimbal being spot on and the camera being well looked after is crucial. So moving on to what else can we go through here? Yep, let's talk about the sensors. So at the bottom you've got 2 sensors, in the front you've got 2 sensors, and you've got sort of 2 at the back here, but they sort of rear sensors. They seem to be on an angle somewhat, but there are no clear top sensors. Whether you need that or not, I don't think so. But anyway, let us start off with the arms here and fold these out. At the bottom is your front arms, and they just simply fold out like so. I'm going to hold this up like this, and then you just fold them out like that. Be gentle with it. And then the rear ones, they simply fold down, and the other one simply folds down, and that's what your drone sort of looks like when it's opened up. Now, it's only 249 grams. There's a reason why they've done that. Anything over 250 grams, and then you're going into FAA regulations, blah, 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 which can be another pain in the pom-pom. So 249 grams keeps us within that weight limit, so we can avoid certain regulations. The battery sits neatly at the back here, as with most drones. It's got 2 little clips that you just push in, slide out, and there's your battery. Battery life on this is quite impressive, around the 30-minute mark, 35 minutes potentially. There is a plus battery version, which you can get even more battery life out of. I'll link those 2 in the description below. So when you're putting the battery in, make sure there's a distinctive click, all right? Because the last thing you want is for that thing not to be connected properly. And then at the rear of the drone is your SD card as well as your USB-C charger port. So you can charge your battery directly in the drone here, obviously. But talking about batteries, what I did was, and I found it absolutely imperative to get 2 extra batteries and this charging hub. This charging hub you can charge obviously in the wall socket on your computer or in the car, because one battery just doesn't cut it. All right, you definitely need more batteries. So have I covered everything else on the drone? I think so. Props are real nice. There is a screwdriver and a bit of research as to how, if you want to change those, make sure you do them properly. But to put the drone on, similar arrangement, put it on and then hold for the second time. If I've done that properly, press it quite quickly, and there it is going. So actually I'll leave that over here, and while that's firing up, I'll do another screen record over here. So now this screen record here is going to capture what it is we see on the drone screen. Right, so we've got our, let's just move that over there. It's pointing into my lounge area. So now that's what you sort of greeted with when you first fire up the drone. And I'm just going to also walk through some of the menu items here. Starting on the top left, you've got normal mode. And as you see, if I move that button to the left, it'll go into cine mode, slow speed. And then if I move it to the right, it'll go into sport mode, which is a bit faster. Normal mode. On the right, you've got a 69. That simply means 69% of battery left. And then there's a timestamp 0000. The minute you take off, it'll calculate how much battery is left and then do a countdown. And that's how much battery life is left. And then you've got your remote controller signal. That is the signal between the controller and the drone. And then the red little icon is obstacle avoidance symbol. And most importantly, to the right, it is a definitive red saying that there are no satellites currently connected to the drone. I'm in my apartment building here. There's lots of concrete around, there's lots of buildings around, so the chances of picking up a satellite in here is pretty slim. The minute I step outside, it'll change, move to an open field, and it'll get well over 20 satellites. And it'll change from red to orange. Orange is not ideal, and then eventually go white. That means you're good to go, and it'll tell you you can take off. So moving on, there's 3 little dots on the right, which I'll get to in a minute. Before we get there, let's just run through some of this cluster on the right in the middle of the drone here. This is where you get to all your camera settings and switching from camera, photo to video and so forth. So as you just tap the top button, there you'll see it brings up a little pop-up menu, and you've got your photo. You can set it to single, you can set it to burst, you can set it to a 48 megapixel photo, which is obviously going to be quite a big size. I just normally keep it in the single shot mode. You can go to video mode settings. Right, for the time being, I'm going to keep this all in auto, because the pro settings I'll run through in another little video when we're actually flying the drone. That's when it's going to be a bit more appropriate. This is just to run through what it is you get with the controller and the drone. So you've got your playback button, you've got your this button on the top here. This is where you get to turn your orientation of the camera to either vertical or back to sort of landscape. And once again, those buttons that I was showing you there, if you just push that one, it'll go to vertical, push it again, and it goes back to landscape. The one on the left, I don't know if I've got enough room to tilt that down. Let me just do this. I don't want it to bash on something. I don't think it will, but anyway, that's tilting it back down. And that just brings it back up again. Forgive all the beach towels here. There's always loads of beach towels here. What else is there? Then you've got a map. Because I haven't connected to any other satellites yet, it can't find my home position. So that's why it's just showing a random map there. Should be, it's weird because it's South Africa, that's where I'm from. But anyway, the minute you connect to all the satellites and it's sort of honed in on your home position, that will update. So always make sure the home position has in fact updated. So we can't really run through the map. The only thing I can do is maybe, yeah, if you do click on it incidentally, it expands and opens up bigger. You can also swipe it and then it'll change to this compass type of arrangement where you can see where your drone is direction-wise in relation to the controller, which is also quite handy. And then on the bottom left, next to our compass, you've got your home position, how far you are from your home position, and the distance you are from the home position. So home, and then the height and speed and all that per second. So have a look at that. And then you can actually, when you're in Pro mode, if you tap on the old Pro mode, I think in Auto mode you can change it as well. You can change from 4K, 2.7, 1080p, whatever your preference is, but that's how you get to it. Given that we really want to get some good footage, when it comes to drone stuff, I would just say, you know what, shoot in 4K. I've always been an advocate of 24 frames per second. That's how I've been taught, because I've been told it's the most cinematic look. But it can be a bit challenging when you've got to follow the rule of when you're making video, your shutter speed to be twice the frame rate. So I may end up shifting to 30 frames per second. That way I can set my shutter speed to 60 to 60. It does bring in the question of using ND filters and things like that, which we'll talk about in another video. But for the time being and for the purpose of this video, and if it's your first time with drones, trust me, just stick to the auto mode and you'll be absolutely fine. There's a reason why they call it Pro, because you've got to sort of know what you're doing a little bit when it comes to ISO settings. And you don't have any choice in terms of aperture. It's a static 1.7, but you do have some choice around ISO and your shutter speed, but that's about it. So I'll just quickly show. You can get into your Pro settings over here, and that's where you can see what your exposure is doing and get that to be spot on, which I might just quickly run to. As you can see, I'm plus 0.3 at the moment. So if I maybe up that shutter speed, it's dropped it to minus 0.3, maybe move the ISO to 2 thing. So yet you got to play with that until you get that exposure spot on, you know. Preferably want it around the 0 mark. So yeah, we'll run through this properly in a more in another video. And then this bottom button is your autofocus, or if you hold on the button, you can actually manually focus. And as you can see, it's changing the focus over there. So certainly some tools available, and then our play button just takes us back to any footage that we may have recorded, photos, videos, favorites, whatever the case may be. So quite straightforward, easy to sort of navigate, nothing untoward. If you hit the back button on the very top here, you're going to get to another homepage menu, but this one looks a little different. It shows the drone there for the simple reason that we connected to the drone. The previous one showed some random picture prior to me putting the drone on, and then you can still get to all those other menu items we spoke about earlier. But when you're ready, you can hit the Go Fly button. Brings you back to our home or our camera image, and it's from this juncture where we're ready to take off. I won't do that now. Like I said, we're going to do that in a separate video. Finally, I'm going to conclude with these 3 buttons over here. right? And this is where you get to set your safety parameters. You got your obstacle avoidance action. Do you want it to bypass the obstacle? Do you want it to brake? Or I would not recommend you switch it off. It's a very, very good feature to have and use. You can disable sideways flight. I'm not sure why, but maybe there be a circumstance where you need to do that. Not entirely sure. Display radar map. Why not? You can set your maximum altitude, auto return to home altitude, and things like that. When you're a beginner, if you haven't really used drones before, keep the drone within, the line of sight. Go to a big open field. Just follow some common sense safety practices. If there's the less people around, the better. You can focus on what you're doing. You can enjoy your time learning the drone. Having an audience around you or people around you can make you a little bit anxious, especially if you're not comfortable with the drone yet. So first get comfortable, keep your settings close, and then as you get more and more confident, you can venture out a little bit more. Baby steps, that's what I say. So familiarize yourself with all these features in here, in particular the safety ones. The reason why there's an update home point here, if your drone's in follow me mode and it's followed you for 400 meters away, you don't want to walk all the way back to the old home point. You can simply update the home point then and there, and that will be the new point where the drone will come to should you hit return home. You can also calibrate your compass and IMU from here, and then it gives you some battery info, unlock geo zones, find my drone, the similar things to the previous menu. And then you got some parameters around the control, metric, imperial for our friends in the States. You can gain and expo tuning. So what that means is you can tweak certain things to work. You'll develop a feel for your videography. This is where you go to change the tempo, the pace of how your works and all those things. Because sometimes it can be a bit jerky and all that. So you do have the functionality to go in and tweak those settings. Both in normal, cine and sport, they can all have their own individual settings, which is very, very handy. So certainly play around with this. If you're unsure, take a screenshot of what it looked like beforehand so you know. And then you can go back and reset it or put it the way it was. There's some additional camera settings, MP4 or MOV, normal or D-Cine-like. D-Cine-like is like a very flat profile that you can use to color grade afterwards. I'm not too familiar in shooting with that, just been using normal, coding format, H.264, etc., etc. Some anti-flicker. Histogram, I kind of like to have that on, does give you some notice. And then you got your overexposure warning, grid lines, yada yada yada. You can change it to a cross like so, or your typical grid line configuration. I normally keep the white balance on auto. Your SD card info, internal storage like we spoke of, and you can also format the card in this menu. And then USB, when enabled and aircraft is connected to computer, aircraft will disable image transfer into low power safe mode. Okay, so that's what that is. And then there's some video caching capacity, so forth and so on. Some transmission information. I typically don't play around in here. I let the drone do its thing. And then there's some about stuff, what the name of the drone is. You can give it a name. You can also check for updates, which is always handy to do. A quick tap, checking that, and then it'll let you know if it is up to date as it has done there. Fly safe data is also good to keep up to date. And just remember, safety first, especially if you're new with these drones. They're amazing little things, but just make sure you operate within the parameters of compliance and FAA regulations and your local either state or country rules. We just want to make sure we are on the right side of it, that's all. What else can I tell you? That is it pretty much. I mean, the only way you're really going to get used to this drone and flying it is by flying it. Watching videos like this is good to get some pointers and give you a nudge in the right direction, maybe add a little bit of confidence. But the only real confidence is going to come from you getting out and about and practicing, essentially. So look, I think that concludes I just want to make sure the overview of the screen when the drone is on. So yep, I'll stop that now and then we'll wrap up this video. So look guys, thank you very, very much for tuning in. I know it's a little bit of a long video, but there was a bit to cover here. I'm really excited with this drone. I've had it like a few times. I'll tag on a little bit of shots that I've managed to sort of get when I was out and about. I'm still learning with the drone. My movements are quite jerky and so forth and so on. But the next video, I'm going to sort of create a series where we do maybe some beginner moves, some intermediate, and then hopefully some advanced stuff that we can aspire to get that cinematic look. I also want to continue using the Panasonic Lumix G9 for my sort of other photography and videography. And I need to figure out how to get the footage to sort of match. So I might start tweaking around with a bit of color grading and making sure, you know, because on the Gold Coast here, I'm fortunate enough, there's a lot to film, there's a lot to show, and that's what I'm really keen to do, is cut my teeth making videos of this amazing place we lucky to call home. So guys, thank you very, very much for watching. Aperture to Zoom is the name of the channel, and where I hope to cover in its entirety everything from aperture to zoom within the photography and videography space. I do have some links in the description to the drone and the battery and things like that, and I would highly appreciate it if you guys use those links. It does help the channel out. Also, like the video, certainly helps the channel out. It does take a bit of time and a bit of effort putting these videos together, so any sort of appreciation in the form of a like would be much appreciated. Look, thank you very, very much once again. If you do have a drone, you do have a camera, get out there, share your links, share your footage, share what it is you're doing, so we can all learn and we can all grow and put together some amazing content and make this world a little bit better, show what a beautiful planet we have. Thank you very, very much, and we will catch up in the next video. Over and out. Bye-bye.